President Trump thinks Canada will cave in. We will never, ever bow down to a bully. Canadians will always stick together. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families. Canadians need to remain united.
President Trump has signed a proclamation making changes to certain tariffs on metals, including steel, aluminum, and copper imports. According to the White House, the adjusted tariffs will drop from 25% to 15%. This tariff would mostly affect agricultural equipment in a move to help farmers facing higher costs because of the Iran war. The order will also allow foreign companies to qualify for a 10% duty rate if their equipment contains at least 85% American steel or aluminum. The changes take effect next Monday and will remain in place until the end of 2027.
Now, in Trump's defense, he did explain today why we're going after Canada.
I mean, I look at some of the deals made, I say, who the hell made these deals are so bad?
So bad. The trade deals with Canada, they're so bad. He's just looking and saying, who made these? Ladies and gentlemen, don't get ahead of me. Ladies and gentlemen, for your dining and dancing pleasure, come with me into the Wayback Machine to 2018. I give you the culprit of the terrible deal with Canada.
This morning, President Trump signed a new trade deal to replace NAFTA with the leaders of Mexico and Canada.
The best trade deal they say ever made.
A deal done by Trump's greatest nemesis, Trump.
Trump is begging for rate cuts, but he ain't getting that wish. This graph shows inflation is a problem, and it's not just the Iran war and oil causing it. Inflation for the world's largest economies. Two takeaways. Look at that big spike in inflation for the U.S. prior to the gray area, which represents when the war began. The war didn't cause this inflection higher in inflation. And two, since the war started, the U.S. has seen the biggest spike in inflation, and the U.S. is the only net exporter of oil on this graph. All other countries are massive oil importers. Therefore, higher oil prices impact them far more than the U.S. So Trump can blame the Iran war for inflation. But this chart says the bigger issue is his broader policy mix. And therefore, yeah, he's not getting his wish for rate cuts this year.
I'm fucking stressed out! I'm fucking stressed! We should not be working like this. I work my ass off and I can't even fucking pay bills, bro. And they always say, don't compare yourself to others. But I see people going to Coachella and fucking like buying all types of shit, just pointless fuck you money. And I'm over here and can't even fucking pay my fucking rent, bro.
Do you know how much it costs to have a baby in America? Depending on your insurance, $6, $8, $10, $12, sometimes $15,000. No insurance can be $30,000, $50,000 if you have a C-section. Do you know how much it is in Canada? Free! You walk in the hospital, have the baby, and you walk out of the hospital, and you just get in your car, and you go home. Cheaper than a cup of coffee.
America just said, fuck you, millennials and Gen Z. You know that 6% that they take out of your paycheck every single cycle? Yeah, I'm talking about the Social Security one. An official Social Security trustees report just dropped, and it confirmed that the trust fund will be dried out as of late 2032. What they're expecting is for anyone that is currently receiving their retirement benefit that is going to be cut by 22%, meaning $500 less each cycle. But that's not the upsetting part. The upsetting part is that millennials and Gen Z will never see a single dime of what they're actually contributing towards for that Social Security tax. So all the Gen Z and millennials that have been paying for as long as they've been working, you're not seeing a single dime of that when it comes your turn to retire. Millennials and Gen Z, get ready to work until you're 80.
Healthcare, U.S. versus Canada, which one do you think is better?
I think that we have an idea of what public health care is in the country and in Canada, and a lot of people are starting to sour on it because the provinces, a lot of them have actively worked to make it bad so they can introduce two-tier health care. In the United States, if you have a really good insurance plan, you have better health care there than you have here in the private world, but you have to be able to afford that. Here, the biggest difference, and I think this is wonderful, obviously, though it is imperfect, you don't go bankrupt
Yep.
if you get sick here. Now, it may take you way too long to get a doctor's appointment, but again, there's reasons why that happens. It's not because the system isn't a good idea. It's because people are actively working to make it worse for you so they can get their rich friends richer. But in theory, if your country doesn't have public health care, your country has nothing to brag about.
Oh, I love that. When I lived in the States, they didn't understand how good we had it here.
So good.
I never, ever thought about money when I was sick.
Yeah.
When I was there, I was like, oh my God, this is a weird feeling. No wonder they're a little more on edge over there.
Sure.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a proclamation to adjust tariffs on some steel and aluminum products. This proclamation will reduce the tariff on some steel, aluminum, and copper imports from 25% to 15%. This tariff cut would mostly affect agricultural equipment in a move to help farmers facing high costs because of the Iran war. Foreign companies can qualify for a 10% tariff rate if their equipment contains 85% U.S. steel or aluminum. The change comes into effect next Monday until the end of 2027. Meanwhile, Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc will be in Washington today. He's scheduled to meet with U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer. The CUSMA review deadline, we know it's July 1st. Canada and the U.S. have not held any official trade talks yet. The U.S. and Mexico wrapped up their first round of bilateral talks last week.
Canada's economy just delivered one of the biggest surprises that we've seen this year yet. Last week, the headlines were all about Canada entering into a technical recession. Canada added 87,000 new jobs in May alone. That's about 9 times more than what was forecasted. Canada isn't actually breaking yet. It's just recalibrating. Headlines create emotion. Strategy creates results.
You said you're stopping all trade discussions with Canada?
Until such time as they drop certain taxes, yeah.
The digital
People don't realize Canada is very nasty to deal with. They've charged our farmers up to 400%, almost 400% on certain products and certain, things. While farmers want to send it, they have to pay 200, 300, 400%. People don't know that. Canada is a very tough country to deal with. I will say that.
But
and I love Canada.
You have USMCA in place.
I know, but
You'll have to do it.
But USMCA is no good if they cheat.
What does that mean?
Well, there's been things going on that we don't like, and things going on where they took advantage. And hopefully we'll be fine with Canada. I love Canada. Frankly, Canada should be the 51st state. Okay, it really should, because Canada relies entirely on the United States. We don't rely on Canada.
There's two parties in a negotiation. One, we're not sitting here taking notes, okay, and taking instruction from the United States. Understanding their position, understand where it's in Canada's interest, in our joint interests to be stronger together.
Family, for years, the dominant assumption in political and economic commentary was simple, that Canada relies overwhelmingly on the United States for survival, particularly in exports, manufacturing supply chains, and even energy trade. And while it is true that the US is Canada's largest trading partner, what is often ignored is how Canada has strategically built one of the most diversified and stable trade systems among developed economies. And in recent years, family, Canada has expanded its trade relationships across Europe through different agreements, strengthened ties in the other regions, and even increased export flows to emerging markets. And so when rhetoric suggests that Canada cannot survive without the US, it collapses under the weight of actual trade data and evolving global partnerships. And what makes the current moment especially significant is not just the trade numbers themselves, but the confidence emerging from Canada's economic positioning. Canadian exports in energy, agriculture, critical minerals, and technology services have found strong demand beyond the US border. And at the same time, family, Canada continues to attract foreign investment due to its political stability, skilled labor force, and even access to multiple major markets through trade agreements. And so in contrast to the idea of dependency, what we're actually seeing is interdependence, where both the US and Canada benefit from deep trade ties, but neither operates in isolation or total reliance. And this is where the narrative begins to shift, family. When American political rhetoric frames Canada as economically dependent, it ignores how supply chains actually function in 2026. We can see that automotive manufacturing, for example, is deeply integrated across both countries, meaning parts cross borders multiple times before a final product is completed. Energy exports flow both ways, with Canada supplying crude oil while also importing refined products and machinery. Agriculture, lumber, and even industrial goods are similarly interconnected. And so the idea that one side does not need the other is not just outdated, it misunderstands the architecture of modern trade itself. And what Canada has been quietly proving is that resilience comes from diversification. And when one market slows or becomes politically unstable, Canada is not locked in. It has alternative channels. That flexibility is power, family. And it is precisely why recent economic performance has surprised analysts who expected vulnerability instead of adaptation. And instead of weakening under global pressure, Canada has been repositioning itself as a stable supplier in an unpredictable global economy. But here's also a psychological layer to this debate, family. Economic narratives are often shaped not just by data, but by perception and national pride. And when a country like Canada asserts economic independence in tone or messaging, it challenges long-held assumptions about global hierarchy in trade influence. And that is why statements like "we need nothing from the US" gain attention. They are not just economic claims, they are symbolic declarations of confidence. However, the reality is more balanced, family. Canada does not need to serve ties with the US to be strong, and the US does not need to diminish Canada to remain dominant. But economies are deeply linked, family, and that interconnection is what sustains regional stability. And so what we are witnessing is not a separation, but a recalibration. Canada is proving that it's not economically fragile, not overly dependent, and not confined to a single trade identity. And instead, it is operating as a mature, diversified economy that understands global leverage. And for audiences watching from the outside, especially those used to simplified narratives of dependency, this becomes a moment of reconsideration, because in the end, the real story is not about one country needing another. It's about how global economies are structured in a way where cooperation, competition, and even interdependence all exist at the same time. And Canada's current economic posture is reminding the world that strength is not about isolation, it is about opinions, it's about adaptability and control over your trade future.